guys. So I had seen recently on people talking about on Twitter about the differences from Passing the Torch Part 2 from its final draft version to what actually was done in the final aired episode. Now, everyone knows Passing the Torch was that, kind of big first time moment where all the original Power Ranger cast minus Justin had decided to move on from Power Rangers, and we had this whole thing where the powers were transferred over to the new cast of TJ, Cassie, Carlos, and Ashley. And we had this, fun kind of ceremonial thing with Demetria, Alpha 6, with including Zordon and Alpha 5 coming back for this, proper passing the torch. And we had, Tommy and the others give, a little bit of final farewells to them. Everyone enjoyed the episode. I remember the episode very well, and I thought, it was pretty cool that they had a send-off. Zordon came back, Alpha came back. It was fun and whatnot. But if you ever get a chance to read the final draft version of Passing of the Torch Part 2, it's vastly different compared to what actually happened in the episode. It was also intended to have all the other characters come back, meaning Billy, Aisha, Rocky, Jason, Zach, and Trini would all return. But there would have been limitations. All the actors except one were going to be stand-ins, so we would never see their faces. However, Trini was intended to come back to be a part of the thing. Now, there's two possible reasons why this just didn't happen. One, they contacted Thuy Trang to see if she would come back, and maybe initially she had agreed to come back, and then perhaps at the last minute, she decided not to do it. The other possible reason was that they had hoped or assumed that Thuy would be the one that would be willing to come back. Well, we don't know the circumstances of what happened behind the scenes. All we really know is that Thuy, Walter Jones, Austin St. John all agreed to leave the series because they were being underpaid. But perhaps maybe the producers at the time remembered that maybe Thuy was the more reluctant one, or maybe because maybe they really enjoyed Thuy, being on the show, and they would be like, oh, maybe it would be more easier to bring her back. So if you ever get a chance to look at the script, and I highly suggest you do, because it's very interesting to see how it differs in so many ways. Because this didn't happen, the entire script was basically rewritten. And unfortunately, it probably happened at a very last minute thing, because if you read the script, bar 2 lines, basically, everything's been rewritten and vastly truncated down. The main thing that I noticed in the original dialogue is that it felt more human. Whenever you any type of superhero show, you turn into a superhero and whatnot, you became a Power Ranger, you would expect to be like, oh my god, I just became this superhero, this is great, this is cool. We really didn't have that interaction. We had the 4 actors leaving, and then we had the 4 new actors coming up, and then they just stand there and, happy, and the former Rangers just gave a couple of their speeches, and everyone gave their farewell, and that was it. And we got basically a freeze frame. In the original script, Zordon actually spoke a lot more. Catherine and the others, when they were, talking to the other Rangers, I chose you well. But then, TJ and Cassie would have actually talked back to them. It's like, wow, this is great. This is the reason why I had, got off the bus. It was destiny, things like that. The only improvement that I could say that from the aired version versus the final draft was Justin's dialogue. In the script, it was he was way more passive compared. Everyone else was reassuring him, oh, don't worry, the new Rangers will love you just as we did. And it's kind of he didn't get a chance to really speak. So he was just I'm here, that's it. Also, of course, seeing Trini back. Now, she did have very few lines. If I'm looking at the dialogue, she only had 2 speaking points. And for the most part, Zordon and Demetria took over. It would have been great to, of course, have Trini back, because, again, it was disappointing when the old cast left. The original version of Passing of the Torch in the script was much better, bar a few things here and there. It gave them more heart, more soul. If you ever watch Passing of the Torch, it feels big because, oh my god, Zordon comes back, Alpha 5 comes back, and we have this kind of smoky chamber. So when you were a kid watching the show for the first time, it felt wow, this is a big deal. Old people are back. But when you watch it, over and over in reruns, and you kind of like, yeah, it was a passing of the torch, but kind of like there was a disconnect. The actors really didn't get time to be with them, like Cassie and TJ were the unfortunate ones the most, where they really didn't interact with them at all. And then when they finally get picked, it's kind of like we were in like a production photos for the new cast. We were just taking photos for like, you know, box art and stuff. It didn't really feel personal. So I say this scene would have probably gone on for maybe 2 extra minutes longer because we had more dialogue from Zordon, Trini, and of course, you know, bringing in the silhouettes of the former other Rangers that had moved on as well. To me, I found this very fascinating because at first I thought what was going to happen is like, oh, maybe they had thought of, you know, bringing Thuy Trang in, but then like they were not sure, so they would have just had dialogue. But then they're like, okay, we didn't get her, we can simply omit her lines and then simply continue on what they have. But no, the entire scene is vastly different. I always wondered, like, what other episodes have this gone through? Because, you know, writing process for Power Rangers or any show in general are, you know, complicated. A lot of things do get changed, omitted, cut, that we don't know whether it's been filmed or not. So there's a lot of stuff that could be, you know, inside the scripts that could have been lost. The same as goes for all like deleted material, cut material that's just we'd never have ever seen or that the actors have forgotten about. But unfortunately, none of this was actually filmed. Even when I was a kid, like I said, passing the torch was fine. I was kind of upset that the old Rangers were left, but yeah, it made sense. Yeah, it's tiring. I'm not going to say they were boring, but you could see that the actors were not getting anything done. And that was kind of the thing that hurt the show more, because they knew the Rangers were going to be leaving. They didn't want to set up plot lines and all this other stuff in conjunction, so it made Turbo worse, because now you have Justin, who really doesn't have anything to do because he can't do anything with the old actors because they have to leave. And then you kind of want to use him because he's the new character. You want people to, you know, enjoy him, fall in love with him. They didn't know what to do with him, so you had all this surrounded Power Rangers Turbo, and then of course it was a drastic change from Zeo to Turbo, so there was a lot of negative things around it. And it was the one thing that I really hated about Turbo was that, okay, you have your actors, they're going to be leaving. That's fine. Everyone moves on. I don't have a problem with that. But in a normal show, you give send-offs to these type of things. There's one final mission that's like, they either save lives, do very heroic things, do cool things. It's always a big moment, or even die. But in Power Rangers case, no one dies. It's simply going to move on. But it always lacked something when it came to passing the torch. It just never felt complete. It always felt isolated. It always falls back to the changing of the Pink Ranger powers from Kim to Catherine. That's still to this day where the transferring of powers worked really well. That's the proper way of doing a send-off, because it's a big important moment to Kimberly. It's a big decision. It's a life-threatening decision on top of it, because she was in really bad shape at that point. So it had all the check boxes to a cool story. Yeah, it did have some things, you know, the city is under attack, the new coming in Rangers, you know, showed them being heroic and stuff, but it just felt always scaled down. I think that's how you can categorize Power Rangers Turbo in general. I think that's what really hurt Turbo. It's just like, wow, we could have gotten something interesting. And I'm not really like, and it's not really about Trini coming back, but even if she wasn't even intended to be in the scene, the dialogue in the script was much better than what they did in the final episode. So yeah, ultimately, these are the factors of how Turbo was affected in so many different ways. Whether it was because Saban did not want to pay for Thuy Trang coming back, or maybe she decided to not, you know, come back, because again, ultimately there's only 2 lines of dialogue that she had to do, and that would have been, you know, I don't know as an actor, because I'm not an actor, I don't know how I feel. There are some people who come back for literally 1 line and then that's it. I've seen it in many shows before, but a lot of times I would think that would be very boring and a waste of time, because ultimately you're going to be on set for the whole day, and you're just going to have basically a couple of lines, and maybe you'll have to do a few bit of ADR lines in the future. But other than that, I don't think it would be worth it. So unfortunately, We lost a potentially better episode that could have come out of from here. What do you guys think of the entire situation? Leave your comments below, because I always wondered, like, how did you feel about passing the torch? Did you feel like more like me, like, oh, this could have been better? Or did you feel like, oh, this was actually pretty good and this was actually a nice end-off? I think the one thing that I really hated, it was the potential that Power Rangers Turbo could have gotten. We had all this planned idea. Remember, the series initially wanted Demetria to be the sister of Divatox, but then that fell through because between the two actors changing, and again, the passing of the torch happened. A lot of potential good plot lines were just simply brushed away. I wish it had turned out better, but unfortunately, that's what we got.